There are obviously going to be a ton of different ways to monetize your show. So I want you to take some time, really think about your offers, think about what it is that you would like your audience to purchase from you, how you want them to take that next step with you. You want to make it really easy for people to, as they're listening to your show, know about your services. And that gives people more of a, hey, I'm able to put myself in this person's shoes and I understand what it is that that company does. Welcome to another episode of Listeners to Leads, where I'm helping podcasters launch and maintain a lead generating show. I'm your host, Alicia Galati, the CEO and head podcast strategist behind Galati Media, a full-service podcast management company. On this show, you'll hear my guests and I discuss everything it takes to launch a successful podcast and keep it running. If you're ready to get leads, land speaking gigs, and create deeper connections with your audience through your podcast, then this is the show for you. Today, we are going to talk about how to monetize your podcast by selling your own services and products. This is obviously the Listeners to Leads show, and so we are going to be talking about how to get leads from your podcast, turning those listeners into leads, and making some cash money dollars, as I like to say. In the last solo episode that we did, we talked general making money and monetizing your podcast. So if you haven't listened to that and you're looking for the more overview or other ways to make money from your show, then I want you to go back to that episode, check it out, listen to it. It's going to be less than 30 minutes, a quick overview of all of the ways that you can monetize your podcast. I also want to note that the week after this episode goes live, we are doing a live challenge. This is the Listeners to Leads challenge, where we are going to be talking through how to monetize your show, how to create content for your show, and how to market your show. We're going to plan out the content, marketing, and monetization for the next month. So you'll be able to walk away after the 3 days with a solid plan, but also with a plan that you can keep implementing over and over so you don't have to feel so overwhelmed. These are going to be live and recorded. So if you're ready to really get strategic with your podcast, then I definitely would recommend that you go check it out. You can use the promotional code podcast, and that's going to get you 50% off your ticket. So you can get in for less than $20. I mean, it's pretty much a steal. It's crazy. For anyone to just do it with me together, it is easily $300 just for a strategy session. So this is a steal. You'll be able to get a plan, create your content, plan your content, and be super strategic with making money from your show. So let's get into today's episode, which is how to monetize your podcast by selling your own services and products. We're going to run through some different things that you can sell on your show. And then we're going to talk about how to sell on your podcast without feeling really gross while doing it. And then we're going to also talk about the 6 mistakes that podcasters make that are costing them leads. And we talked about that back in episode 5, but I'm still going to run through those because I think they're so important. And I want to make sure that we do chat about those here today. When we talk about monetizing your podcast by selling your own services and products, what I'm talking about is using your podcast as a direct selling point or funnel to then bring in people to pay you money for your services or your products. This is going to be different than the other ways that people usually monetize their podcasts, which is what we talked about in the previous solo episode. But these are still ways to use your podcast to make money. So that's why we're going to be talking about it in a different light, but I want to at least kind of explain that. When we're looking at a funnel, the very top is obviously going to be wider, and then it kind of goes down into a smaller base. Now, the wider top is where you're going to have more people coming in, more people getting the information, and you're going to use that to be able to then take people to that next step with you. So your podcast is going to be the main source of content, free things that people are going to get. You can then take them to a downloadable, a freebie, maybe a low ticket offer, or sell those high ticket services using their podcast. We're going to go through all of these, but this is just kind of to give you an idea of getting a lot of people at the top and then funneling them through the different layers of that customer journey to then the bottom, being able to sell them to those higher ticket or one-on-one services. But you should be able to sell from either the low ticket offers or the high ticket offers from your podcast. You just have to decide which one you want to use and pick from this list that I'm going to say to then determine what's going to be the best way to monetize your show, selling your own services and products. All right, so things that you can sell on your podcast. The first obviously being your services. If you have services to sell, then make sure that you're talking about them. Make sure that you are letting people know how they can work one-on-one with you or even in group program settings. If your business provides some type of service, whether that is through conversations with someone or consulting or even doing an actual service. So in my case, my business provides podcast management services. We do everything from editing only to full service. And so that's literally just drop it in a Google Drive and we do the rest. Those are things that you're going to want to talk about. You want to talk about how you can work with someone, how they can be able to work with you very easily and make it super simple for them. You don't want to overwhelm them. Just say, hey, if this is what you're looking for, then let's do this. Next one is coaching programs. So if you do have coaching services where you are helping someone walk through a process or walk through a journey of taking them from one step to the next, then your coaching services is a great thing to use to monetize your podcast. Promote them, talk about them, and then get people to sign up for those. We have clients that they're able to pre-sell a lot of their group programs and their group coaching programs because they're using their podcast as a funnel and a direct selling point for that coaching program. So it is possible to sell out your coaching programs using your podcast and being able to show up as the expert and the leader in that space. There's obviously a way to strategically do it, but this is at least something that you can sell on your show. Next thing you can sell is strategy sessions. If you are looking to really start at a lower price point with your listeners and you want to ensure that they have a quick win that you can then convert them into a longer term client, then a strategy session is a great way to do that. You can use the strategy sessions, maybe give them a $50 off coupon or whatever that is going to then allow you to track that they're coming from the podcast. So any way that we can, as we're kind of going through these, track them as they're going from podcast into leads, that's going to be important too, because then that tells you the type of people who are listening to your show and what actually converts really well and what doesn't. But you won't know that if you're not tracking it. The next thing that you can sell is one-on-one time with you. So this is similar to the strategy sessions, but where the strategy sessions might be focused on one specific thing, some one-on-one time with you might be more broad. Maybe they want to pick your brain. Maybe they want to have a similar business model to you, and they just want to kind of have a conversation around it. This is also something that you can sell on your show or talk about on your show to then use to monetize your podcast. The next thing that you can sell is courses. So if you have courses, and the one that's after that is memberships, but we can talk about them at the same time. Courses or memberships are a great thing to sell because they're a lower ticket. You typically aren't going to spend, depending on the course, obviously, or depending on the membership, you might not spend more than $100, $200, $300 a month to get this offer. And being able to convert people from listeners and getting that value and then saying, hey, if you want to learn more, or if you have questions about this, then we can take that next step and you can get this course or this membership where you can get more one-on-one time with me, or they're able to learn more about that specific topic that you're actually talking about. The next one is content upgrades. So this is a really great idea and strategy that if you have downloadables that are relevant to the content that you're talking about, or maybe if you have mini courses that you can sell that it's like, we're just going to talk very simple strategies, very simple basics. And if you want to know more, then you can get this content upgrade. It's usually going to be a quick downloadable. Maybe it's going to be a 20-minute video, but it's going to be a quick win where they're able to then take that next step in that content. Another thing that you can sell on your podcast is masterminds. So using your podcast to bring people into your circle, allowing them into this space to then mastermind with their peers. This is going to be a really good strategy for those who are maybe sold out on their one-on-one coaching, or their group coaching programs are all sold out, but they're wanting to create a space for their audience who has already done those things and wants to continue the relationship with them, but they might not have space for them. So creating a mastermind where they can say, hey, if you're a listener and you've worked with me before, I have this great offer. Here you go. Another thing you can sell is an app. So we have a client that is in the astrology field, and they already use their podcast to promote their membership. But as they're creating this app that they're also going to be having soon, they can use their podcast to promote that. So it's a way that they can easily take their audience to then purchase from them, buy from them, and continue that relationship in a very low ticket way. When I say low ticket, I just mean low price way, where it doesn't feel overwhelming and it's them getting some type of content on a regular basis. Another thing you can use your podcast to sell is an event. So if you are hosting an event and you want to be able to sell those tickets through your show, or specifically to your audience that are listeners, then using your podcast to do that is going to be a great way. It's already your target audience. You're already having these conversations. So why not take that next step to say, hey, if you want to go to my event, then here are the details and you can easily join me at whatever. This last one might be a little different, but you can use your podcast to then repurpose into a book and then sell that book. So you're using it to monetize your podcast, but also it's almost like a circle, right? Of your podcast turns into a book, then that book sells and then is putting money back into the podcast. There are obviously going to be a ton of different ways to monetize your show. So I want you to take some time, really think about your offers, think about what it is that you would like your audience to purchase from you, how you want them to take that next step with you. A good example of this is that obviously Galati Media, which is my podcast management agency, we offer full service podcast management. That is not something that I promote very actively to my audience on the Listeners to Leads show, because a lot of them are at that beginning stage of wanting to launch a podcast or planning to launch a podcast, or they are podcasters, but they're really trying to figure out how to make money from their show. Since they're not already making money from their show, it wouldn't always make sense for me to promote my high ticket services, because we are on the higher end for podcast management. Because of the value that we add, most of my clients, they get 2 strategy sessions per month from me and with me, where I will go through their content, their marketing, monetization with them. So it's very tailored and specific to their show. It's that marketing strategy and that podcast strategy along with the implementation. Our services are a little more expensive than someone who's maybe just doing the management side. Because of that, I would rather promote something that is a lower ticket offer that is going to be more group focused to my podcast listeners. So that's why the Listeners to Leads challenge, as well as the Listeners to Leads program, are things that I'm going to promote on the show rather than actually working with us. Obviously, we talk about it still. So if someone did want to work with us, we always have that availability and we talk about it very generally. But I'm never going to create an ad space really for my Galati Media company, but I will create something for Listeners to Leads challenge and Listeners to Leads program. You put your heart and your soul into your show, and I want to help you reach all of those potential listeners out there. That's why I'm excited to announce my upcoming podcast marketing workshop. It's about giving you practical tools to grow your audience. You'll learn the secrets to getting your podcast discovered, attracting your dream listeners, and boosting those download numbers. This workshop will be hosted live with a replay available on April 30th. You can sign up by going to galatimedia.com/workshop. Let's grow our podcasts together. Now on to how to sell on your podcast without feeling gross. There are obviously so many different ways that you can do this. You can create an ad space that is specifically just plug and play. Here's a quick tidbit about my offer. If you're interested in more, make sure you check the show notes for the link, or here's a quick link that you can go to. You want to make it really easy for people to, as they're listening to your show, know about your services. Another thing you can do is to talk about it. So like I just did, where I was explaining what I'm selling on the show and why I'm selling that specifically and not something else, now you know what I sell. Now you know exactly how to work with me. I've made it very clear what it is that my company does and the types of services that we offer. That is a quick and easy way to really be strategic with your content to ensure that the examples you're giving, maybe you're giving examples of clients that you've worked with, and that gives people more of a, hey, I'm able to put myself in this person's shoes and I understand what it is that that company does. Another way that you can sell on your podcast without feeling gross about it is by having very candid conversations with your guests. So you're going to talk about your clients. You're going to talk about your services. You're going to be talking about maybe some things that you've experienced as a business owner or as a coach or whatever that you're able to then tie into the conversation. Obviously, we don't want to say things that don't make any sense for the conversation. We want to make sure that what we're talking about is relevant to the topic that you and your guest are discussing. But you can always tie it in very easily without feeling like you're having a hard time talking about it. Make it very natural, make it very conversational, and you shouldn't have any problems. And remember that you can always go back and edit it out. So if you're having a hard time with that, or you feel like it's not coming across authentically, cut it out. That's fine. So those are just a few of the ways that you can sell on your podcast without feeling gross and making sure that you're selling on your podcast about your own services and your own products. I'm going to quickly run through the 6 mistakes that podcasters make that is costing them leads. We did talk through each of these very in depth in episode 5, but I still think it's relevant to at least discuss these during this episode. So the first one is talk about everything but your products or services, which we talked about with the previous section of selling on your podcast without feeling gross about it. So making sure that you are talking about your services, you are talking about your products. Don't talk about everything else. Make sure that you're tying it into what it is that you do and how it serves your audience. The next thing is putting an ad in the beginning of your podcast. So if you have an ad in the first 5 minutes, that's going to feel really overwhelming for people, and they're going to feel like you're just trying to use your podcast to sell to them without educating them. And yes, you are, but you also want to educate them. So make sure that you don't have that ad in the first 5 minutes. Obviously, if your show is a little shorter, you might end up having it in that first 5 minutes, but for that, I would recommend just putting that in the outro if you do have a shorter show. Third mistake is only mentioning your products or services within the ad space. So if you do have a mid-roll section or a post-roll section where you do talk about your services, that's great. And also talk about it during the show, as I said before, where you're maybe discussing with your guest or you're giving examples of ways that your clients have utilized things or ways that your clients are getting wins through the services that you offer. So making sure that you are talking about it outside of just that ad space. Number 4, having a guest-only podcast show. If you want people to buy from you, you have to be able to show up as a thought leader and as a leader in your industry and as an expert in your field. That is not going to always be able to happen if you only have a guest-only show. You want to make sure that there is a way for you to still show up as the leader and as someone that they can buy from. For that, I know that can be really overwhelming for people who are like, I don't really do well on solo shows, or I'm not really sure what to talk about. If you can repurpose past content or conversations that you've had with clients where you're maybe able to go more in depth about something, then this is going to be a great way to do that. I recently had a conversation with a client where they were asking some ways that they could market their show. And so we looked at their social media and we kind of dove into these different strategies and things they could do, some best practices, and maybe even some things that they hadn't even thought of, or were some basic things that I felt everybody should know this, everybody should do this. I can then take that content and that conversation and create a podcast episode that's specifically basic 101 things to do to market your show. Really being able to tie that back into, hey, this is a service that we offer. This is something that we're doing. And I don't feel so overwhelmed at the fact that I'm doing a solo episode. Also, I feel really comfortable doing solo episodes, so maybe that's not the best example. But if you're feeling overwhelmed and you're not sure, then have it as a conversation. Really be able to set yourself up where you remember the things that you said to that client. You remember the things that you are sharing with your audience and finding a way to very conversationally share that with a podcast audience. Mistake number 5 is never mentioning your show notes. Always talk about your show notes. Always talk about where people can take that next step with you. You want people to go to the show notes and you want them to be able to follow you, be able to find you on social media or wherever. I know that as of the recording of this episode, Apple Podcasts does not have hyperlinks. So make sure that at least one of those links is fully written out where people can copy and paste it if they want to know more or if they want to be able to find you. You can also have a website that is attached to your show. So it makes it very easy for people to figure out where they can connect with you online or learn more about you and your business. Number 6, winging your content plan. And this goes right into check out the Listeners to Leads Challenge because it's going to help you with that. When you wing your content plan and there's no plan and no strategy and no thought process going into the content that you're producing, it's like just throwing pasta at the wall, hoping it sticks. You're not actually going to generate leads that way. It's going to feel disjointed. The conversations are going to feel disjointed. The content isn't really going to be able to flow or take people on that journey from listeners into leads, which is exactly what we want. So let's make sure that we're focusing on not doing any of these mistakes. If any of them are mistakes that you're doing, or if you're like, whoa, Alicia, I'm doing all of them, let's make sure that you just grab 2 to 3 of those things and work on those. Don't feel overwhelmed like you have to do all these things or change all these things about your show. Take it one step at a time. Don't feel overwhelmed. Take a deep breath. And also join the Listeners to Leads Challenge because that's going to help you be able to plan out your content and your marketing and your monetization for the next month. All right. These are obviously some general ways that you can monetize your podcast by selling your own services and products. There are other ways that you can definitely do this, some different products, which we barely touched products within the physical realm of products or those kinds of things. But we want to make sure that you are using your podcast very strategically. If you do not want to make money with your show, that's okay too. You can use it as a hobby, but make sure that you address it that way and that you put that kind of effort into it as a hobby. But if you want to generate leads from your show, you want to use your podcast to grow your business, then you're going to need to monetize it in some way. There's just some really easy ways to talk about it, to make sure that you turn those listeners into leads and make some money from your show. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Listeners to Leads. If you found something in this episode valuable, I would really appreciate it if you shared it with a friend who you know would also get value from it. Want to send me a message? My favorite place to hang out is Instagram. You can find me at alicia.galati. Let me know what your favorite takeaway was from the episode. And don't forget, turning those listeners into leads is actually easy.